What's up, guys? Connor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. And today, we actually don't have all that many things to discuss. We have one major thing that I want to discuss with you, and then we're going to be joined by, I believe, editor-in-chief of the Bucks County Beacon, and that is Cyril Mychalejko, which I somehow have figured out how to pronounce the last name, I think, correctly uh, over the years, I suppose. But the first and major thing that we're going to discuss is the collapsing of the Silicon Valley Bank, why that has happened, my opinion on it as a progressive CPA, and really we're going to take a look at in the second portion of the segment on debunking why wokeness is not the reason that the bank failed. You might be surprised by that. Probably not if you have any grounding in reality. But of course, that's the world that we're living in, and everything has to do with some form of connection to wokeism. So, with that, we will dive right into it, and we're going to talk broadly speaking here, and then we're going to go into some of the clips of right wingers. So, to start, the Silicon Valley Bank is, of course, in Silicon Valley, and it is one of the largest banks in the United States. Supposedly, based on assets managed, it was about 16th. Of course, banking regulations in this country are not good, if I want to put it nicely. If I don't want to curse. And banking regulations in this country have been degraded since definitely since the Trump administration, but we definitely want to go back into the thick of things further to understand how we end up with one of the largest banks in the country collapsing. And there's multiple reasons for this, okay? So let's rewind. Let's go back to 2016, let's say, or even 2015. If you go back to the 2015-2016 election, you might remember the that crazy white-haired guy, Bernie Sanders, ranting and raving about something called Glass-Steagall. This was a bill, I believe, passed in 1933 in the response to the Great Depression. Now, Glass-Steagall was a bill that essentially made it so that the type of bank you are, I'm trying to use it in the most normie phrasing that I can without getting into the weeds too much, is an investment bank is not the same as just a bank where you would put your money as a regular depositor, right? So there's certain restrictions that a bank would have if you put your money in as a deposit in a savings account, as a checkings account, and how a bank can loan or invest that money. Now, we go from 2016 to 1933. Now let's fast forward all the way to Bill Clinton's administration. And to be frank with you, off the top of my head, I don't exactly remember the year, but in the Clinton administration, Glass-Steagall was repealed. And so basically what this means for us is that many of us, our entire lifetimes, or the majority of our lifetimes for those born, in the 80s and the 70s, at this point, the majority of our lives have been impacted by a deregulated banking system, which has led to not one, not two, arguably three, if you want to go into, stock crash, if you want to go into the Great Recession, if you want to talk about COVID, and now maybe this, there's different arguments. Like, let's take COVID out of it, but the potential of a third recession now being caused by deregulation in banking and investing. So, where does this all kind of boil up into Silicon Valley Bank? Well, what happens here is you have a bank that, and this all connects. I have to lay out the history because it all connects. We're going to go back to 1929 soon. But Silicon Valley Bank is unique in some way. And it's not because it's woke, as we will go over. But the main uniqueness of the bank is that its size is just small enough to be under the threshold that would be regulated by the Dodd-Frank Act of 2009, passed under the Obama administration. Now, Dodd-Frank was a step in the right direction for regulating banks, but it was not Glass-Steagall, and it was not building upon what Glass-Steagall did, like beyond the regulations that it needs, right? So we needed to reinstate Glass-Steagall, and we needed to go further and protect in not investors necessarily. I mean, although I think that we should protect investors, as we'll talk about, but you need to protect depositors, and you need to make sure that people that are getting loans that they can actually afford. And talking about the failure of expertise, of course, loops back in here, because a lender shouldn't be giving money to somebody that they know can't pay it back. So that's, again, where the Great Recession comes in. Now, SVB, similar concept, except instead of mortgages, you're dealing with tech companies. Now, you may or may not have heard that in the last couple of months, the last maybe year or so, there have been major layoffs in the tech industry. Now, this is from a variety of different reasons, but this is for a variety of different reasons, say. But the lack of liquidity, and I'll talk about liquidity in a second here and, break that down. But the lack of liquidity for these companies means that they cannot pay their employees, or that they cannot cover costs without getting loans. Now, remember what we talked about last week. When the Fed raises the interest rate, it is harder to get loans because they cost more. And if businesses can't get loans, businesses that don't make money can't pay the people that work for them. And believe it or not, and this might actually be shocking to some people, some of the biggest corporations, maybe not the biggest corporations, but some of the most prominent corporations that you could think of in the tech industry don't make that much money. What happens is that they're highly leveraged, and they borrow a lot of money on the speculation that someday they will become profitable, or they will become a monopoly like Amazon, or they will become a sort of how do I want to put it? They'll have a stranglehold on what they'll have patents, or they'll have some sort of monopoly of service or good, basically. And that's what makes them valuable. They could either be acquired, or they could be their product or service is just so valuable that they make billions and billions of dollars. Now, if you are, say, someone that is an accountant, or you're a financial manager, or whatever, if you work in the industries like this, you've seen companies, you've maybe audited companies, I have, that make absolutely no money. They speculate on the potential profits. They lose all their money. They go out of business. Right? So what ends up happening is, based on however they were formed, some people get paid their debts, other people don't, and they get off, right? SVB was one of the most highly leveraged banks, I should say, in the country, with over 90% leverage investment. So basically meaning, if you have X amount of assets, let's just say $1 million in assets, meaning cash, equipment, machinery, take you back to accounting 101 here. If you invested $500,000 of that, that would be a 50%. If you invested $1 million you'd be at 100%. So with 90%, that means that 900,000 of the 1 million is invested and is leveraged. Now, remember, this is how banks make money. So if banks are not regulated, they're going to be more likely to leverage themselves in a more aggressive way because they're playing with other people's money. What do I mean by that? By playing with other people's money, I mean they're literally playing with depositors' money. When you put your money in the bank, they lend that money out and they get interest on the loans. That's how they make money. Now, let's just use Google as an example. Google's not a good example here, but let's just use them because everyone knows Google. If a company like Google were to come in, let's just say Bing instead, right? I know Bing's owned by Microsoft, but let's just say that Bing existed in isolation. Said, hey, we're a startup company and we want to do a search engine that's a competitor to Google and do all this stuff, right? Wonderful. SVB is going to lend them money. Let's just say $1 million again. And that $1 million is going to be used to pay for payroll. It's going to be paid for, paying rent, marketing expenses, all this different stuff, right? But if that company fails, that's the risk that the bank takes. However, if the businesses, all of these different businesses and the owners in these businesses, because a lot of the businesses are owned by the pass-through entities. So what happens is, like, I could own a pass-through entity and ultimately, I get liability protection from my corporation. So you can't sue me, but I get the money from the corporation. If my money that I put into SVB is at risk, or I think it's at risk, it may cause, as this is what happened, a bank rush. Which, here we go, takes us back to 1929 into the Great Depression, where people rush the bank to get their money out of the bank. What happens is, when you're over leveraged, when you have 90% of your investments in non-liquid, and remember, I said I would come back to liquidity, but liquidity basically means that you have money, you have cash, or you have short-term investments that could be liquidated or sold for cash. So what happens is, everybody starts to go into they start panicking, right? All these people that have a lot of money, come back, because that's important too. They have a lot of money in the bank. They need to get their money. I need to get my money. I need to get my money. I'm going to run to the bank, pull my money out. Okay, maybe Connor O'Hanlon, I get my $1 million out of the bank. I'm okay. But maybe, you in chat, or you listening at home, or you listening on YouTube, or somebody that's going to comment some nasty stuff on the video. We're all rushing the bank. We all need to get our money out of the bank. There's no money. Because the bank doesn't have it because it's invested. So then they have to sell their investments. But while the interest rate is going up, the liquid investments that they have end up losing money because their interest rate on those short-term investments are too small. So they lose money. And if all of these things line up, the bank goes kaput. So I know that's a very elaborate, convoluted way of kind of understanding what happened here, but that is what happened. Essentially a mirror of 1929, a bank rush to a bank that was overly leveraged in speculative markets. They have their investments and their money tied up in companies that don't make money, and they can't liquidate it. They can't pull it back. And that's what happens. Now, the bank collapsed, and it just so happened that the majority of the money that they had from depositors was uninsured. So you may know or you may not know, but if you look at the deposits that you put into your bank, and I assume most people watching this are not the uber wealthy, as some people think that I am uber wealthy. I am not. I can assure you that. The FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, I got that right. They insure up to $250,000 in each account. Now, you may have learned that back in macroeconomics, or you may have learned it in your personal finance class in high school. I know I learned that in high school, and I remember thinking to myself, hey, I ever have that amount of money, which again, I don't, but if I did, wouldn't I want to move it around a lot? Wouldn't I want to make sure that it's insured? Wouldn't I want to make sure that just in case that it's under the threshold? And I do audits of companies and we do all this stuff, right? And what they do is they do something called a sweep. So it goes in and out of the account. It goes in and out of the account, whether it goes into, an escrow account, or if it goes into, it just goes in and out. It goes back into the checking account so that they can pay their bills, right? That's how a normal way to reduce that risk happened. But all these investors or these depositors didn't have these set up. So now the bank collapses. You, me, and everybody else that has 10, $15 million in there, we lose all of our money. And there's another story as to why I'm going to hold off as to why people had that amount of money in this bank. I think more news will start to come out as to like the practices around that and the sweetheart deals that were being produced from that. I think as more information comes out, we will know, and maybe we'll return to that later. But what happens now is that the government has to bail out the bank or the depositors. And again, there's a philosophical debate to be had here. Maybe we can have that. But right now, the FDIC is going to guarantee all the depositors' money back. And Biden has assured that. Now, I personally think that it should solely go to the depositors. None of it should go to the bank. The bank should be, liquidated, sold, whatever you want to do with it. And I think that there should be reinstatements of both Glass-Steagall and the repealed pieces of the Dodd-Frank Act, which was repealed by Donald Trump, which I may have forgot to mention. All of that is to say, and again, I think we might loop back around to having the philosophical debate. I want to wait and see. My conclusion is not drawn as to whether it's morally correct or not to bail out these depositors. I think there is an argument in both ways. Definitely let me know what you think in the chat, but I've swayed back and forth. My initial reaction is we got to protect the average person, the consumers, but then again, who is putting more than $250,000 in the bank, which is, everybody knows, if you have over $250,000 in the bank, what is insured and what isn't. Like, let's be honest here. So that is why I say that the practices that the bank is engaging in needs to be public information. We need more information on that for me personally to feel comfortable drawing a conclusion. But to ensure stability and trust in the system, Biden administration is going to bail people out. Now, that is the real story. What other people want you to think is the woke banking system. So, one point of note here. Question in chat says, taxpayers aren't paying the payouts? Technically speaking, from what I know right now, no. What has been announced so far is that the FDIC will be. Now, the FDIC collects fees and taxes and all that stuff from banks, not from taxpayers. And as of right now, my understanding is that the money is not going to the bank. The bank is being basically sold off for pennies on the dollar. but it is going to the depositors, which if they're going to do that, that's the way you should do it. But, there are other people that have had their banks collapse. And look, my bank for my pack, I have a pack in a different bank than my normal bank. And trust me, I don't have 250K in it. I wish, but that is, I've been getting emails saying, hey, look, we're not going anywhere. We're not going, but there's a legitimate fear that these banks are going to start collapsing. And that is not good. That is very, very bad. And I think the reason for this is, and I'm going to try to, speed run this, is we have Senator Hawley saying that Silicon Valley Bank was too woke to fail, completely irrelevant and delusional. We have Fox News saying, these are headlines: diversity and inclusion, building a diverse and inclusive Fox. Even though they're dedicating their programming, all of this stuff, and saying all this stuff, and highlighting all these things like, oh, we care about this stuff at Fox. Yeah. But if you, and then this is going to start playing, if you listen to what the Fox News media outlet is actually saying, it's this.
First of all, they pledged $75 million to Black Lives Matter.
They is SVB.
And no one on the bank's board is a banker. There's one banker on the board, and the rest of them are Clinton and Obama mega donors. Then,
typically speaking, boards of directors, specifically for large corporations, are just influential and rich people. We can have the discussion and what should be, but these people on this panel here, on the 5, don't actually give a damn about putting regular workers on boards of directors. I do, as an accountant. Like, that's something that is very important to me. I would make it law, to be honest, that workers in the corporation should have a seat at the table, but these people don't give a crap about that.
Janet Yellen appoints this woman, probably a nice woman, to oversee this bank. She's the San Francisco Fed chair, and she's so excited.
What? Take a guess as to why Jesse Waters is so, she's gonna fail because
on her first day of the job, Emily, she makes a little video and she kisses her wife goodbye at the door, and then she puts a little backpack on and she goes to the bank and everybody claps for her and they make a little video, and she knows nothing. She's supposed to oversee what's going on here, and she totally missed it. Not only did she miss this bank's collapse, she missed inflation too. But like Greg said,
again, remember that inflation is caused by supply chain issues. The collapse of this bank is not caused by woke-ism. It's not because of DEI. It's not because of pronouns. As I was leaving the gym last night and I saw on Fox News, again at the screen, pronouns were, pronoun seminar was promoted at Silicon Valley Bank, which leads to the collapse. Wrong.
She's got her eyes all over diversity. This bank was all about gender equality.
Yeah, because gender equality is so bad. DEI is so bad. What is your actual point here?
You say you want to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? If you want to have Pride Month at the bank, if you want to do silly little skits about inclusivity, fine. But keep your eye on the balance sheet. If you're doing all this woke stuff and you're not looking at the finances, then that's a problem, and that's what.
So that's it really here. Keep your eyes on the balance sheet, he says. Keep your eyes on the balance sheet. Well, my friend, Jesse Waters, Greg Gutfeld, Tucker Carlson, my friends, my buddies, my pals. If you care about looking at the balance sheet, because I got to tell you this. I got to break it to you. Corporate America does wokeism, as you call it, because it's profitable for them. It's good for the workers to understand. It's good for workers to feel included. But it has no negative effect on performance, because you know who also does DEI? You know who also does woke trainings? JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, TD. You know, these gigantic banks, Goldman Sachs, they all do it. I worked for a Fortune 200 energy company. You know what my training were? DEI. We're part of it. It's not just that, it's part of it. There is absolutely no impact of DEI training on the bottom line, which he's talking about profits and losses, which again is on an income statement, not on a balance sheet, but whatever. Your balance sheet is about leverage. They're lending money, they take the risk. The point of this is to say that in the end, they don't care about regulating the banks. They don't care about doing it correctly. They don't care that the Republicans are typically the reason why deregulation happens. They don't care to even blame the easy Democratic target of Bill Clinton because he got rid of Glass-Steagall. They want to stick to the woke-ism that is overrunning our banking system. Because, yeah, we have so many woke bankers that's what's happening. This is a failure, and this is, I hope, this is, I'll leave it at this, and then we'll go to our guest. This is a, honestly, a major failure of messaging for Republicans, because if they just ignored this woke crap, if they just engaged with their policies, they wouldn't win. They could never win. They could never actually say, we want to deregulate banks. We want to give more power to the bankers, because that's not what the American people believe, and that's not what actual policy will bring forth to you in a platform that is productive. They have nothing built on truth. They have nothing built on working class politics. They go for wokeism because they have no other term. They have no other phraseology. They have nothing to stand up for working class people. And I should say, they won't say they won't say the quiet part out loud. They use wokeism as this catch-all term. They won't say that the banks are failing because there are, minorities in leadership positions, because that is what they're implying. They're implying that trainings for pride events and making sure that we have diversity on our boards and all this stuff is such a tragedy that it's collapsing banks. And we know that that is not the case. We know that it is not the case. All right. With that being said, I'm going to bring on our guest for tonight. I'm going to gotta adjust our screen here. He can't see me, but I can see him. All right. We are good to go. Joining me now is Cyril Mychalejko, who I believe, Cyril, would you consider yourself the editor-in-chief? Is that the title that you use over at the Bucks County Beacon? Oh, can't hear me? Cyril, can you hear me? Maybe not. We got some technical difficulties, I suppose. Let me check if he can hear me. This is the fun part of doing this live. You never know what you're gonna get live. We will see as we talk about this. I suppose we can. I think let's take a look at this clip while I figure out what's going on here. This is a clip from Brianna Joy Gray's podcast, which I have critiques of her Don't get me wrong. In which she asks the question of a right-wing guest, what is wokeness?
Themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. Sorry, it's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look, your time.
Of Americans.
That's the cringe right there. That's the most cringe clip I may have ever seen. Because you just can't define. They can't define wokeism. They have to just make things up, I suppose. We're still having some issues here. We're still having some issues with Cyril, so I will keep filibustering as we do. I'm sure I have more and more clips to show us, but let's see what else I got in the store here. We got Cyril, can you hear me? Nope. I thought I heard him for a second. This is... I don't want to do that one. Let's see what else I got queued up here, because we always got a few things in here. Let's go to... Oh, you know what? I have a clip that I emailed to myself. Sorry, you guys. This is what happens sometimes. You got a filibuster. It's great. Let's see if it works now. Maybe we can... I can hear you, Cyril. Can you hear me? Hello? Maybe. Cyril, can you hear me? Hello? No. Still can't hear me, huh? This is what happens when you do it live. Like Bill O'Reilly said. We'll do it live. Still can't hear me. This is... Let's see if I do this. Can you hear me, Cyril? Maybe. Can you hear me?
Connor, I still can't hear you for some reason.
This is so weird. You still can't hear me? Wow. I don't know what's going on here, guys. Can you call? Let's see if you can call. I know, so in chat, I can hear him, but he can't hear me. That's the problem here, not the other way around.
Kind of, for some reason, like, you're muted for me.
Okay. Is your computer... That's what I'm thinking. I don't know what it is. Oh, man. I don't know what's going on here. Wow, this is
Here we go.
Can you hear me? Now you can? Yeah. All right. Let's do it. It's all good. That was enough. I'll cut out the audio version. For those on YouTube, you get the full effect of doing this live. The Bill O'Reilly effect. joining me now for real this time is Cyril Mychalejko. And Cyril, what is your technical title? I was going to say editor in chief. Is that what you go by, Bucks County Beacon?
Yes, editor in chief of the Bucks County Beacon.
Great. All right. So joining us today, and this is the return. Cyril, I don't know if you've ever been on this version of the show because I've been doing it live now for the last almost year. But Cyril was a frequent guest, one of the few guests that came on multiple times in the old version of the show, the Con O show. But on the Greater Society podcast, this is his first appearance. But Cyril does a lot of writing previously in local newspapers that may or may not have bad slants. And we have now the Bucks County Beacon, which is what we're here to talk about a little bit today. So Cyril, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, and the Bucks County Beacon is a progressive media outlet, right, that we've been kind of building out for the last couple of years now. I've been editor of the Beacon now for about a year, right? We're right up on the anniversary. And what we're trying to do is be an outlet that provides the news and analysis that you're not going to get at the perpetually shrinking Courier Times and the Intelligencer, as well as to be a platform for like local community voices. One of the things I'm proud of is just that the roster of writers and contributors that we've kind of built out in this last year. Most recently, Layla Casey, who some of your audience might know, began writing for us. She did a great news report, on the ground reporting of the first, kind of like teacher-student protests and Central Bucks against Policy 321, which is essentially an anti-LGBTQ policy, as well as a policy that encourages censorship, self-censorship. It creates a climate of fear where teachers are, where it has become essentially a teacher gag, right? A classroom gag, which seeks to kind of limit and shrink, the conversations that might be had in classrooms. And in addition to Layla, we have Jenny Stevens, who's just like always cranking out like what's happening on the ground with like local politics, local events, what the activist community is up to, etc. We have Catherine Caruso, and our coverage goes beyond Bucks County. We're also like covering what's happening across the state. So like Catherine Caruso is one of our regular contributors. She just had this like heartbreaking story about a Lehigh Valley hospital that's trying to deport a comatose undocumented mom, right, back to the Dominican Republic. And she's also covered, why there's teacher shortages in Pennsylvania. She had great coverage of the attacks by libs of TikTok, Doug Mastriano on Fox News, on the Rainbow Room, which is, which is Bucks County's most, valuable resource for LGBTQ youth. Mm-hmm. We've recently had Pat LaMarche start writing for us. She's written about homeless students in Bucks County, how Bucks County families are suffering with the loss of SNAP benefits. She also did a great article about how Pennsylvania House Democrats want the state constitution to protect workers' rights to organize and collectively bargain. And then we have like, our roster of regulars, our regular progressive writers, whether it's Kirsten Zolfo, keeping track on, what Fitzpatrick's doing and just kind of like busting the myth of him being some kind of like voice of moderation or vote of moderation in Congress. we have Kadita Kenner writing about voting rights, Molly Parzan, the environment. Alicia Shagaratsky is a new contributor. She's from Bucks County, and she's writing about the environment monthly for us, as well as like, Barbara Simmons, Steve Nolan, Steve Sakay. So, we're really trying to kind of like build, movement media for Bucks County. And we're trying to kind of, be a megaphone for the community, and as well as kind of like create knowledge, right, that folks can use as they're doing their organizing and activism. And one last note on this, before I give the mic back to you, is we are having a fund drive right now. And so we had one in the fall, and we were able to get 100 sustainers at $10 a month. We're trying to do that again, because right now, within our budget, monthly sustainers are not even like 10% of that. So if we're gonna be here for the long haul, right? We need that to grow. And it's not just like investing in, it's not just an investment in the Beacon. It's an investment in the writers who write for us, and it's an investment in the community, because we're covering, what's most important in the community, whether it's local elections, what's happening with school boards, etc. And we're shining a light on both, the progressive organizing and the progressive voices that are fighting for, a sane Bucks County. The bad, which is like what we're seeing like Fitzpatrick do in Congress, and the ugly, which is what we're seeing happen in Central Bucks School District, with the far right school board, and they're kind of like, the peanut gallery that they have showing up every month, just kind of like vomiting their hate and their nonsense.
Yeah, and to echo this too is just to say that independent progressive media is so important, especially in a local areas, because you see these. We talk about the corporate takeovers of local news. We talk about the media conglomerates that just keep combining and combining and combining, and they're just buying things out, and it just becomes all the same. It becomes this corporate, like legitimate corporate BS, like where it's just the same narrative or a slightly different narrative. And that's where I actually, so many people were angry about my critique of Russell Brand last week, because I said that MSNBC is not the same as Fox News. But the thing is that the real critique there is to say that they are impacted by corporate investors. They are impacted by the people that pay for the advertisements on their screen, basically. Now, independent media like this, like the Beacon, relies upon individuals. It relies upon small. It's like, the Bernie Sanders movement or AOC running for Congress. It takes a village to build something bigger, and it takes, in this case, dozens of writers. It takes hundreds of people to support. It takes all these different things to lift a progressive movement, to then get the messaging out, to then get people elected, and then to make progressive policy in action. So that's the whole pipeline here. So it's very important. So if you can go and support the Beacon, I suggest that you do it. And I think we could probably throw this out there too. If you want to get published, you want to write a letter to the editor, all that stuff, that's something you can also do. How could people do that at the Bucks County Beacon?
Sure, they can contact me on Twitter at Mychalejko, or in the show notes I can include my email, and folks can email me like that, because we want you to contribute. We want your voice to be heard, because one, historically in Bucks County, with the Courier Times and the Intelligencer, they often either marginalized or ignored progressive voices, right? And now their opinion page like barely exists, right? So you're not even being able to write the letters to the editor or write the guest columns that you once were able to at least submit. That didn't mean that they were going to like publish it, right? Yep. But you could at least submit it. And so like we're trying to fill the void with that. And let me just say, like, you were right on with like your Russell Brand critique. Like he was trying to like, bring like some kind of like dime store version of like, Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, there's a shrunken spectrum of voices that are allowed in mainstream media, and even on like MSNBC, which is considered more liberal or left, right? You're not getting the radical voices or the radical critique that might be like kind of like going after like corporate capitalism or like US foreign policy, right? And so while that is true, there is a huge difference between MSNBC and like Fox News, right? Fox News explicitly and knowingly publishes or broadcasts misinformation, right? We know that because their text messages, which just got leaked out because of this Dominion lawsuit, proves it. They knew that they were kind of promoting the big lie. They knew it was a big lie, and they did it anyway. And never mind, like, the white nationalist, and white supremacy that you're getting out of like Tucker Carlson with him kind of like regurgitating like the replacement theory, among other things. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it. That's all I'll say about it. We could spend a whole hour on that. But yeah, you were right on. Russell Brand's take was pretty weak tea, right? And I'm glad that you said it.
Yeah, it was funny just to see the backlash in the clip, when we clipped it. But it's sometimes I expect that. But the critique is to say like the Overton window is shrinking the more we let our media become one. As more and more billionaires get their, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. That doesn't help in the unionization effort. That doesn't help in, I don't shop on Amazon, but I don't expect everybody else to do that, right? So it doesn't help push back against the monopoly of goods, but also the monopoly of information. And like, we don't live in a society where there's a monopoly of information, but the more we let these giant corporations take and take and take, people like us get our voices, pushed aside. It becomes harder to become the next Bernie Sanders, AOC, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, or even, get a counter narrative like Ashley Ehas did and running against Brian Fitzpatrick. So breaking that narrative is necessary. And I can't say how important it is to have independent progressive media. So, but independent media broadly, but having progressive media and having progressives have a voice. I mean, I've had Sarah Zhang on the show previously, and she wrote in the Beacon. I've been published in the Beacon. I mean, this is giving people a voice that otherwise, I've got denied from other publications. Now I've gotten into the Herald, I've gotten to other places, but it's not fun to be like, well, why is this getting denied? Like, well, we don't necessarily agree with your message. So that's really what it boils down to. But
well, yeah, we want to, expand, people's political imaginations about what's possible, because there's such a limited kind of scope of what's acceptable oftentimes on mainstream media. And it's off, and what we've seen historically is that the anti-war voices, the pro-environment voices, those are the voices that are getting ignored or stifled.
And that brings me back on, oh my God, this week has been crazy already. But on Monday, I was on a Zoom call with Bernie Sanders, actually, about his new book. And he talked about two things that all came together in this. But he actually talked about manufacturing consent. He talked about how that's a book that everybody should read, Noam Chomsky. But he basically also said that Noam Chomsky wouldn't have said that they're the same, that corporate media is all the same, that media, everybody has the same narrative. And he also talked about a story, and I'm not going to try to steal his whole thunder, but talked about a story where he was running for president and his grandson was holding a sign that someone gave him, obviously, but a sign that said, it's a quote from Nelson Mandela that said, "Everything is impossible until you do it." So that is basically the way we have to look at it. Building this progressive movement, rebuilding it, if you want to look at it that way, from the New Deal era, or building it better. This is the way that we have to do it, and starting from the grassroots and building it up. So, Cyril, I appreciate you coming on. I know this is a quick hit. I have to make sure that you come on again, and we'll talk more about your pieces. I have another meeting at 8:30. Wonderfully busy, but I appreciate you coming on. And I threw the link to the Bucks County Beacon into the chat. Now, if you're listening to this after the fact, or you're listening to a clip or whatever, you can find the link in the description box below. Or if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, whatever, it's in the show episode description as well.
Well, thanks for having me on, Connor, and I look forward to coming back on. There's a lot to talk about, with the school boards especially.
There's always a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, and so like in addition to like folks inviting folks to kind of like reach out and support and be part of the Bucks County Beacon, get involved in your school board elections, because this is huge, and I hope that we can talk about what's at stake, next time you have me on.
Absolutely, and we'll make sure it happens soon. So you send me your availability. We'll get you back on. It's every week, every Wednesday. So it's an open invitation for you.
I appreciate it, Connor, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Cyril. Thank you so much for coming on. All right, guys. With that, let's go into one final clip before we go, and I'm gonna pull it up because it actually does have
defend policies of discrimination in our schools against our children. I could talk about the staff hiring crisis our schools face. I could talk about how our teachers are so unfairly paid that hundreds of teachers are suing the district for fair pay. I could talk about how my teacher friends tell me that the new hires of recent years are woefully unqualified. But instead, I'm drawn here for a much less mature reason. Unfortunately, I have to address my comment today to our school board vice president, Mrs. Lee Vlasplum. Mrs. Vlasplum, my name is Charlie Casey. I am Leila Casey's husband. It's come to my attention that Mrs. Vlasplum has shared a meme that I assume she finds derogatory with the caption, Mrs. Leila Casey's husband. To get everyone up to speed, here's what she shared on a group text.
It's the picture, which I need to show you guys because I'm like an idiot and forgot.
It seems that our school board vice president is spending time trolling a community member. I find that shameful. The picture Mrs. Vlasplum shared seems to be tending to classify me as a member of the LGBTQ community. I assume that that's meant as an insult, but as a straight white man, I can't think of a bigger compliment. It means to our school board vice president, I'm at least associated as an ally to the LGBTQ community. It means I'm associated with standing up for the marginalized, the victims of bullying. It's exactly where I want to be. The picture also seems to indicate that our school board vice president is anti-unicorn. I don't know if you noticed the unicorn picture. I don't know what that's about. I thought we all like unicorns. But anyway, when this picture came to my attention, I laughed it off because I'm from an Irish Catholic New York City family, and surviving that requires thick skin. But the fact that this is coming from our school board vice president, a person who's supposed to be an advocate for all of our students, pissed me off. So Mrs. Vlasplum, I'm here to offer you an opportunity to own up to this. I really believe blessed are the peacemakers. So I'm offering an opportunity to lower the temperature between our opposing sides. Please take ownership of this act of trolling and apologize. Not just to me, but to the students who see this trolling message as an attack on their identity. I promise if you do, I'll forgive and forget. You'll even earn back a modicum of respect in my eyes. Please show the class and dignity of your school board position that it deserves. Thanks.
There you have it. I'm going to show you guys the picture. I did. There you go. Picture. Obviously, that's not Charlie, and that's the text as the shown here in the bottom. Leave last bomb. So good for them. Good for Charlie. And yes, you do spy Tony, who is running, and we will talk. Oh, we will talk about the Central Bucks School Board a lot coming up. So welcome to the Greater Society podcast, where we discuss progressive politics all the way down to the local school board insanity week after week, up to the national insanity week after week after week. This is the craziness that we're dealing with. But with that all being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I apologize for a shorter show today. I have another meeting in 1 minute. So, of course, I have to run. But while you are here, we gained over 10 subscribers last week. So what I need you to do is keep that growth going. Hit the subscribe button if you're watching, and hit the thumbs up if you are already subscribed, because that really will help us grow. If you don't want to watch on YouTube, you can listen to the show on anywhere that has podcasts, essentially. Follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at Greater Society Media. You can support the show for as little as $3 a month at patreon.com/Greater Society Media. And you can follow me on Twitter at Con O'Hanlon. And in the description box below is links to join the Discord server. But With all that being said, thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. I will see you guys next week. Peace.